Welcome to Sinister States.
My name is Aaron Vance, and I don't take contracts that come with explanations. Not because I don't want them, but because the ones that do usually mean someone has already decided what the problem is, and they're just looking for confirmation. That's not what I'm paid for. I get called when the situation doesn't hold together, when the reports contradict each other, and when whatever's happening doesn't stay contained long enough for anyone to label it correctly. The tower was already active when I got there. It sat on the edge of a mountain range that didn't get much traffic outside of maintenance crews and the occasional survey team. No marked trails, no public access, just a narrow service road that wound its way up through the trees and stopped about 50 yards short of the structure itself. From there, it was all exposed rock and open ground, the kind that doesn't give you anywhere to hide if something starts moving towards you faster than expected. I arrived just before dusk. That part wasn't accidental. You learn more about a place when the light starts to fail than you ever will in full daylight. The terrain changes, distances distort, and anything that doesn't belong stands out faster against the shift. I parked at the end of the service road and took a minute to scan the perimeter before stepping out. No movement, no sound beyond the wind cutting across the ridge, and no sign that anyone had been up there recently. That didn't match the report. The assignment came through a private channel I've worked with before. Minimal details, no official documentation, and a single line in the briefing that mattered more than anything else. Operator reports repeated vertical movement on the exterior structure during night hours. No confirmed source. Vertical movement. That's not something you misidentify. Animals don't climb like that without leaving evidence, and people don't scale exposed towers in the middle of nowhere without a reason that shows up somewhere else in the report. The fact that neither had been confirmed meant one of two things. Either the operator was wrong, or whatever was out there wasn't leaving behind anything that could be tracked. Just an empty space with a folding chair, a small desk, and a set of monitoring equipment that had been left powered on. The screens were dark, cycling through inactive feeds that didn't connect to anything useful. Whatever system had been in place to observe the area wasn't recording anymore, or it had been disconnected before I arrived. That wasn't standard procedure. I checked the interior quickly, moving through the limited space and confirming what I already suspected. No secondary exits, no hidden compartments, nothing that explained why someone would abandon an active post without shutting things down properly. Unless they didn't leave by choice. I didn't assume that yet. Assumptions get people killed in places like that. Instead, I focused on what I could confirm. The structure was intact. The area showed no signs of forced entry, and whatever had been reported was tied specifically to the exterior. Vertical movement. I stepped back out onto the platform and closed the hatch behind me, letting my eyes adjust to the fading light as the horizon dropped into shadow. From that height, I had a clear view of the surrounding terrain, the tree line, the service road, and the exposed sections of rock that led down the slope on the far side of the mountain. Nothing moved. For a while, it stayed that way. The sun dropped fully below the ridge, and the last of the natural light drained out of the sky, leaving behind that brief window where everything sits in transition between visible and obscured. That's when most people make mistakes. They assume nothing is happening because they can't see it clearly yet. That's not how it works. The first sound came from below, not from the trees, not from the road, from the base of the tower. It was light at first, a single point of contact, metal on metal. I didn't move immediately. I listened. The sound came again, slightly higher this time, followed by a pause that stretched just long enough to make it clear it wasn't random. Something was making contact with the structure, testing it, adjusting position before moving again. Climbing, slow, controlled, and deliberate. I stepped toward the edge of the platform, keeping my movement minimal as I angled for a view down the side of the tower without exposing my full position. The darkness had settled in enough that visibility was limited, but not completely gone. I could still make out the outline of the ladder and the sections of metal running down toward the base. That's when it stopped. Not gradually, not like something losing interest. It just stopped, midway up. No retreat, no continuation, just stillness. I held position and counted the seconds in my head, tracking the silence the same way I would track movement. 5 seconds, 10, 15, nothing. Then it shifted, not upward, not downward, sideways. Something moved across the exterior frame of the tower, transitioning from the ladder to the structural supports without producing the kind of sound that should have come with that kind of movement. That's when I understood the first mistake. I had assumed it needed the ladder. It didn't. The metal beneath my feet carried a faint vibration, subtle enough that most people would miss it if they weren't paying attention, but it was there, moving through the structure in a pattern that didn't match wind or environmental stress. It was climbing, and it wasn't using the same path twice. I stepped back from the edge of the platform, giving myself space and reducing the angle from which I could be seen from below. The instinct to look over again hit immediately, stronger than it should have been for something I hadn't fully identified yet. That's how it starts, not with panic, with curiosity. I didn't give in to it. Instead, I focused on the sound, tracking it, mapping the movement based on what I could hear instead of what I wanted to see. It moved higher, closer. Then it stopped again, right below the platform. No sound, no vibration, nothing. For a moment, I thought it had pulled back. That was the second mistake, because the next sound didn't come from below. It came from behind me, a light contact against the hatch door, from the inside. I didn't turn around immediately. That's the difference between reacting and surviving. The sound against the hatch came again, softer this time, like something testing the surface instead of striking it. There was no force behind it, no urgency, just contact, measured, intentional. The kind of movement that doesn't come from something trying to get in, but from something that already understands the barrier in front of it. The hatch was sealed when I came out onto the platform. I checked it myself. Locked from the inside, no secondary access, no way for anything to get through without making noise or leaving damage behind. But the sound was there, right behind me, close enough that I could feel the vibration travel through the metal frame and into the soles of my boots. I stepped forward instead of turning, 2 controlled steps toward the edge of the platform, increasing the distance between me and the hatch without making it obvious I was reacting to it. If something was on the other side, I didn't want it tracking my movement based on sudden shifts. The contact stopped. Silence settled in again, heavier this time. That didn't mean it was gone. It meant it was waiting. I angled my head slightly, just enough to bring the edge of the hatch into my peripheral vision without committing to a full look. The surface was still. No movement, no shadow passing beneath the frame, nothing that confirmed what I had heard. That's when it tapped again, 3 times, evenly spaced. Not random, not environmental, structured. That was new. Everything up to that point had followed movement patterns, climbing, repositioning, adjusting angles. This was different. This was communication, or at least an attempt at something that resembled it. I turned slowly, not fast enough to trigger a reaction, not slow enough to lose control of the moment, just enough to bring the hatch fully into view while keeping my posture neutral and my hands clear. It didn't move when I looked at it. The metal surface sat exactly as it had before, closed, sealed, unchanged. But the sense of proximity didn't match what I was seeing. It felt closer than it should have been, like the space between me and the door had shortened without anything physically crossing it. That's when I noticed the handle. It wasn't in the same position. When I came out onto the platform, I had set it horizontal, aligned with the locking mechanism so it wouldn't shift under pressure. Now it sat at a slight angle, not fully turned, but no longer where I had left it. I didn't remember it moving. I would have heard that. The internal mechanism wasn't silent. I stepped closer. 1 step, then another. Each one measured, controlled, keeping my weight balanced in case I needed to move fast in either direction.
The wind had dropped almost completely, leaving the platform exposed in a way that made every sound stand out sharper than it should have. No movement from below, no climbing, no scraping against the exterior frame, just the hatch and whatever was on the other side of it. I stopped within arm's reach. The instinct was to check it, confirm the lock, open it just enough to see what was inside. That's how most situations escalate.
Not because something forces entry, because someone decides to look. I didn't reach for it. Instead, I listened. Nothing. No breathing, no shift in weight, no indication that anything was directly behind it anymore. But the handle stayed where it was, slightly turned, like something had tested it and then stopped before completing the motion. I stepped back. That's when it hit again, harder this time. A single impact against the hatch that carried enough force to rattle the frame and send a sharp vibration through the platform beneath me. I didn't move toward it. I didn't step back further. I held position and let the sound settle, tracking the direction and weight of it instead of reacting to the shock. It didn't follow up. No second strike. No attempt to force the door open. Just that one hit. Then, silence. The pattern didn't match aggression. It matched testing, probing, figuring out how much resistance was there and how I responded to it. I shifted my attention back to the edge of the platform. If it had been inside, it would have committed to that path. It didn't, which meant it was still moving between positions, exterior, interior, or something in between. The idea didn't hold cleanly, but neither did anything else about the situation. I moved away from the hatch and repositioned along the opposite side of the platform, giving myself a clear line of sight down the ladder again. If it returned to climbing, I needed to see where it came from and how it moved when it wasn't focused on the door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the sound returned. Below, but not where it had been before. This time, it came from the far side of the tower, out of direct view from my position. The contact points were lighter, faster, spaced in a way that suggested a different route up the structure entirely. It wasn't repeating the same pattern. It was changing it, adapting, learning the layout. I moved along the platform, keeping low and controlled as I shifted toward the opposite edge. The darkness had deepened enough that the structure blended into the background in sections, breaking up the outline and making it harder to track movement without relying on sound. That's when I saw it. Not fully, not clearly, but enough. Something passed between two support beams about 10 feet below the platform, crossing a gap where there should have been open air. It didn't climb into view. It didn't move along the ladder. It transitioned across the frame in a way that didn't match gravity or normal movement patterns. Too smooth, too fast, and too quiet for something with that kind of mass. I didn't try to identify it. That's another mistake people make. They need to label what they're seeing before they react. You don't need a name to understand danger. The sound shifted again, closer, right beneath me. Then it stopped. The platform didn't vibrate this time. No pressure, no weight distribution, nothing to suggest it had reached the top. But it was there. I could feel it. Not through the structure, through the absence of everything else. The wind didn't return. The forest below stayed completely still. Even the ambient noise that usually carries through open terrain had dropped off, leaving the space around the tower isolated in a way that didn't belong. That's when the hatch moved. Behind me, slow, deliberate. The handle turned, fully this time. I heard the internal mechanism shift, metal sliding against metal, the lock disengaging. I didn't turn around, because whatever had been outside the entire time was now inside. I moved away from the hatch the moment I heard the lock release. Not fast, not sudden, just enough to create distance without signaling panic. If it had wanted speed, it would have forced the door earlier. Everything it had done so far suggested something else. Control, testing, observation. Was on the other side, was adjusting to the change, recalibrating once the barrier was gone. The metal creaked slightly as the seal broke. A narrow gap formed. No rush of movement, no immediate entry, just a slow widening of space. I kept my eyes forward, fixed on the edge of the platform, tracking the darkness beyond instead of what was happening behind me. That wasn't instinct, that was discipline. Because the moment you give something like that your full attention, you give it control over your reaction. The hatch opened wider. The sound was minimal, too minimal for something that size, and that told me more than anything else. Weight without sound, movement without pressure, presence without confirmation. It didn't follow the same rules. I shifted one step to the right, angling my body so I had a wider escape route toward the ladder if it came to that. Dropping from the platform wasn't ideal, but staying in a confined space with something that had already proven it could move between positions wasn't an option either. The opening behind me stopped expanding. It had reached its full range. Still no movement, no footsteps, no breathing. Nothing that should have come from something entering a closed space. Then the air changed. Not in temperature, not in pressure, in density. Like the space around me had thickened slightly, just enough to register without being obvious. It wasn't coming from the outside, it was coming from inside the tower, from behind me. I turned, slow, controlled, and stopped the moment the interior came into view. The hatch was open, fully. The darkness inside the tower was deeper than it should have been. Not just because of the lack of light, because it didn't match the space I had seen earlier. The dimensions felt wrong. The angle of the walls, the depth of the interior. It looked longer, not physically extended, but stretched, like the space had been pulled inward beyond what the structure could actually hold. That's when I saw movement, not at the door, further inside. Something shifted in the darkness. A shape, not defined, not stable, just enough of a change to confirm that something was there, positioned beyond the threshold where I should have been able to see the back wall, but I couldn't. The interior didn't end where it was supposed to. I didn't step closer. I didn't lean in, because whatever that space had become, it wasn't the same environment I had entered earlier. And stepping into it again wouldn't lead to the same place. The movement stopped. Then it adjusted, coming closer, not with footsteps, not with sound, just a change in position that shortened the distance without crossing it in a way I could track. That's when it spoke. Not clearly, not in words, but in something that carried the structure of language without forming anything I could process. A low, uneven sound, layered, like multiple tones overlapping slightly out of sync. It didn't come from a mouth. It came from the space itself, from inside the tower. And it wasn't directed outward. It was directed at me. I didn't respond. That's another mistake. People think they need to answer, acknowledge, engage. You don't. Because the moment you do, you're no longer observing, you're participating. The sound shifted, adjusted, trying again, still not forming anything recognizable, but closer, closer to something structured. That's when I realized what it was doing. It wasn't speaking, it was learning. Testing patterns, trying to match something it had already heard, something from me, my voice. I stepped back, one controlled movement, increasing the distance between myself and the hatch. The shape inside responded, not by advancing, by stabilizing,
holding position like it had reached a point it didn't need to move beyond yet. The sound stopped.
Silence returned, but the pressure didn't. It stayed, focused, waiting. I shifted my attention to the ladder. That was still the only confirmed exit. Dropping from the platform carried risk, but staying meant giving it more time to adjust, more time to figure out how to close the gap without triggering a reaction. I moved, 2 steps toward the edge, then a third. The moment I committed to that direction, the air behind me changed again, faster this time. The density increased sharply, like the space was compressing, closing. I didn't turn, I didn't check. I moved. Straight to the ladder, hands on the rails, weight shifted forward and down. The descent was controlled for the first few rungs, then faster. Not careless, but faster than I would have preferred under normal conditions, because the sound followed. Not from above, from inside the structure, tracking my movement, matching it, without using the same path. I cleared the midpoint of the tower before I heard it again on the exterior. Metal contact, above me. Not climbing up, moving across, parallel to my descent, keeping pace. That's when I understood the pattern. It didn't need to choose a route. It could use all of them. I kept moving, rung after rung, maintaining grip, keeping my footing stable. The ground came into view, closer, closer. Then the sound dropped, from above to below. I stopped, 1 rung above the base. The contact came again, right under me. Not from the ladder, from the support frame. Something had moved ahead of me, cutting off the exit. I didn't hesitate. That's how you get trapped. I pushed off, dropped the remaining distance, and hit the ground hard enough to register impact without losing balance. Then I moved, away from the tower, not back toward the road, sideways. Breaking line of sight, because whatever was tracking me wasn't relying on a single direction. The moment I cleared the base, the structure behind me shifted. Not physically, not in a way that would show damage, but in presence. Like something had fully occupied it, claimed it. The sound stopped, completely. No movement on the exterior, no contact, no vibration, nothing. I didn't stop moving, not until I reached the edge of the exposed rock and the first line of trees. That's when I heard it again. From the tower, above. A single sound, clear, structured. And this time, it used my voice. It didn't say anything I had said before. That would have been easier to process. Instead, it used my voice to say something I hadn't. Aaron. Just that. Nothing else. Same tone, same cadence, no distortion. Perfectly aligned with how I would have said it myself. I didn't turn around. Names are anchors. If something uses yours, it's not identifying you, it's trying to hold you in place. I kept moving into the tree line, letting the density of the forest break the open exposure of the mountain. The ground shifted underfoot from stone to packed dirt and roots, uneven but familiar enough to navigate without losing speed. I didn't run. Running creates noise. Noise gives position. Instead, I moved fast and controlled, increasing distance while keeping my awareness wide enough to catch movement from any direction. The voice didn't follow immediately. No second call, no repetition, just silence. That was worse, because it meant it didn't need to rush. I angled left, cutting parallel to the slope instead of heading straight down toward the road. If it was tracking me from above, a direct descent would have made it easier to predict my path. Breaking direction forces adjustment. For a while, nothing happened. The forest returned to normal in stages. Wind through the branches, distant movement from smaller animals, ambient noise filling the gaps where silence had been too complete.
It almost felt stable again. Almost. Then, the footsteps started. Not behind me, ahead. Heavy, measured, moving through the trees at a pace that matched mine without accelerating or slowing. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I shifted one step to the right. They adjusted, maintaining the same distance. That pattern was familiar, not identical to the first contact at the tower, but close enough to recognize.
Something was pacing me. Not chasing, not intercepting, matching. I didn't try to close the gap. I didn't try to circle around it, because that's what it wanted, movement that could be predicted. Instead, I changed elevation, dropping down a shallow incline to my right, forcing the terrain to interfere with whatever line it was using to track me. The ground became less stable, covered in loose soil and broken roots that shifted under pressure. The footsteps hesitated, just for a second, then resumed, still ahead, still matching. That told me two things. It wasn't relying on visual tracking alone, and it wasn't bound to a single path. I kept moving, long enough for the pattern to stabilize. Then I stopped again. This time, I didn't move immediately after. I waited. 10 seconds. 15. The footsteps didn't resume. No adjustment, no shift in position. That's what I understood the change. It wasn't pacing anymore. It had stopped where I stopped. Not ahead, not behind. Aligned. Same position, same level. Something had matched my location exactly. I stepped back, slow. The ground held the impression of my movement, soft enough to register weight, but not deep enough to distort shape. I watched the surface carefully as I shifted, tracking for any change that didn't come from me. Nothing moved. No second set of tracks, no disturbance. But the presence didn't change. It stayed with me, locked to my position. I moved again, forward this time. One step, then another. The pressure followed, not through sound, not through movement I could see, through alignment. Wherever I was, it was. That's when the voice came back, closer, not from the tower, from the trees, directly ahead. Stop. My voice again, same tone, same control, no urgency, no threat, just a statement. I didn't respond, I didn't slow, because that's what it was testing. Whether I would treat it like a command. I kept moving. The pressure shifted, slightly, like something had leaned in closer without crossing the space between us. Then the footsteps returned, behind me this time. Heavy, faster, closing distance. That broke the pattern. Up until that point, everything had been controlled, measured, deliberate. Now it was changing, escalating. I increased speed, not into a run, but enough to create separation. The ground leveled out ahead, giving me a clearer path through the trees and fewer obstacles to navigate around. The sound behind me adjusted immediately, matching the increase without losing ground. I didn't look back, because the moment you confirm distance visually, you risk freezing. And freezing is how it closes the gap. The footsteps gained, not gradually, suddenly, like something had decided to stop pacing and start moving. I cut right, hard, breaking direction sharply enough to force a delay. The sound behind me overshot slightly, continuing forward for a fraction of a second before correcting. That gave me space. Not much, but enough. I pushed through a denser section of trees, letting the branches and uneven ground interfere with direct movement. It slowed me down. It slowed it down more. For a moment, the distance held. Then the voice came again, from the left. Wrong way. Same tone, same control, closer than before. I didn't change direction, because it didn't know where I was going. It was guessing, testing responses, trying to guide movement into something predictable. I kept pushing forward.
The trees began to thin ahead, not fully open, but less dense, enough to see further than a few yards at a time. That's when I saw the clearing. Not natural, too even, too clean. The ground flattened out in a way that didn't match the surrounding terrain, with no undergrowth and no debris where there should have been at least some. I slowed, just slightly, because that's how traps work. Not by forcing you in, by giving you something that looks easier. The footsteps behind me slowed too, matching, waiting. The voice didn't come again. It didn't need to, because now I had a choice. Keep moving into something I didn't understand, or turn back towards something that was already closing in. I stepped into the clearing.